This crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to get a first deposit match up to $100. Of course, Locked On Eagles fans, I'm David Harrison of Locked On Commanders, and Locked On Commanders, he is Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles. Don't boo, be polite, it's okay. On this crossover Thursday episode, we're going to discuss the upcoming Week 8 matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders. Louis, they are facing off in a sold-out FedEx Field, which is super exciting until you realize that a lot of those people are going to be wearing green.
I was about to say,
it's
I wasn't going to say it
until
you said it, but normally the Eagles fans show up in that stadium, so it should be a good atmosphere, absolutely, especially if you're a Birds fan.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's gonna be a good atmosphere, period. But certainly the home field advantage is not going to be as good as the Commanders would certainly like it to be. But Louis coming in and saying, I mean, this is an NFC East divisional matchup. Obviously, for the Eagles, it is a prime opportunity. At 6-1, you can probably say they already have a chokehold on the division, but to even greater going to the midway part of the season, take an even deeper hold on the season for the Washington Commanders. I mean, there's a hole that you're in. You got to start digging yourself out somewhere. What's the biggest story, though, coming into the matchup that's big already for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, for the Eagles, you're right. It really is just about stacking wins. The schedule is only going to get tougher. They had their first real, I feel like, statement win this past Sunday night against the Miami Dolphins. Not that they were playing pushovers, but, because the Commanders really gave them all they could in that first matchup. Honestly, probably should have won that game. You got the Rams, the Vikings, the Jets beat the Eagles a couple weeks ago, but the schedule gets tougher. They have two matchups still with the Dallas Cowboys coming up. They play the Kansas City Chiefs, the San Francisco 49ers, the Buffalo Bills. So for the Birds, it's about stacking wins. They're 6-1 right now, a stranglehold in the division. But that one seed is so important throughout the playoffs to have the playoffs in the NFC run through Philadelphia. So this is another opponent that the Eagles are favored against, and it should be one of those wins that there are no excuses about. And again, with the schedule only getting tougher, you can't afford to lose 2 of 3 games in the last 3 weeks against inferior opponents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that's going to be a theme, for both of these teams right now, is the schedule only getting tougher. And that's why when you're the Washington Commanders, losses to the Chicago Bears, losses to the New York Giants, you talk about beating teams that you should beat. Right. Those are 2 games that the Washington Commanders are walking away from thinking that talent-wise, they were the more dominant team on paper. But then once you get on the field, obviously things didn't go that way. But when you look at both of those games, the Chicago Bears, you can really kind of point to the Washington Commanders defense and say, well, you're the reason that happened. Then you go to the New York Giants game, you look at the offense and say, well, you're the reason that happened. And that's really the story of the season. That's the biggest story of the year for the Washington Commanders. Is going to be the biggest story coming into this game. Because of that is consistency and the lack thereof. And we're not just talking complimentary football, but even one side or the other picking up. Every once in a while, the offense has to pick up the team. The defense has to pick up the team. Usually with the team, you kind of have that stronger unit that if one side or the other has to do the heavy lifting, that's going to be the side. We expected it to be the defense. But 4 times this season, the Washington Commanders defense has given up 30 points or more, to including 34 points in that loss to the Philadelphia Eagles and then 40 points to the Chicago Bears. But, oh, by the way, on the other side of things, the offense can't take a victory lap, because now twice this season they've failed to score even 10 points in a competition. They failed to score more than 20 points 3 times this season. Meanwhile, they've also scored 30 points or 24 plus points 3 times. It's just been a night and day situation almost to a weekly basis. So the question is going to be here, can the Washington Commanders put together consistent football, not just on either side of the ball, but on both sides of the ball? I would say the most consistent effort they really had probably came against the Philadelphia Eagles, but only because the Washington Commanders defense didn't truly falter till later in the game. And then the Washington Commanders offense kind of got off to a better start and then faltered towards the end, right up until the end of regulation. But I don't know that we've seen a single matchup yet this year, Louis, where the Washington Commanders have put together 60 minutes of good, clean football.
And honestly, the Eagles are 6-1, but you can kind of say the same thing. Like, you look at that Tampa Bay game, a lot of that had to do with the defense. Then the offense really took over against the Rams. I would say this past weekend against Miami was the first time I felt like all 3 phases completely dominated. Because even that Rams game, the defense really locked down Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp in the passing attack in the second half. But the first half, they were kind of getting cooked up and down the field, and that's what happened against Washington too early in that game. I mean, Sam Howell, I thought he looked really good against the Eagles, and Jalen Hurts got going in the second half, but it's been an up and down year for sure. But the Eagles are definitely starting to put everything together. To take a look at that Eagles defense, which struggled against the Commanders. They allowed 31 points in that game. They have allowed in the last 3 weeks, though, just 183 passing yards per game and 3 passing touchdowns. In weeks 1 through 4, they were allowing 260 yards per game, and they had 9 total receiving touchdowns allowed. So they're starting to tighten things up. They traded for Kevin Byard. He may play in this game. I'm not 100% sure, but that's a safety presence they really needed. So things are starting to look up and lock down, I should say, from a consistency perspective.
Yeah, and the Commanders are hoping that onboarding that new safety kind of takes a little bit. Maybe next week. Maybe save him for next week. Let's not unveil him just yet. It's a long season. Let's go ahead and take that a little bit slower. But you mentioned the schedule for the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, again, the Commanders in a very similar boat. It's hard to kind of say there's a tougher game coming up than maybe the Philadelphia Eagles, when the Eagles are one of the best teams in the NFL so far. The San Francisco 49ers certainly late December kind of on that list. But even still, the New England Patriots just did a number against the Buffalo Bills. That's on the road. The Seahawks are always tough in Seattle, and they're pretty good this year. The Giants obviously have proven that they have the ability to beat the Washington Commanders if they don't bring their A game. The Cowboys are the Cowboys. The Miami Dolphins is a track meet. The Los Angeles Rams, I think, are better than a lot of people expect them to be. The New York Jets just proved to the Philadelphia Eagles why you don't sleep on anybody. So there's not an automatic dub anywhere left on the Washington Commanders schedule, which why this is a game that you hate to say it, but it's almost a must win. I mean, the atmosphere around the Washington Commanders is not very good, but in order for them to be able to get that must win, they're going to have to win some key matchups, and some key players are going to have to really step up on the Commanders side. Of course, the Eagles have the same situation, so we'll talk more about that coming up on this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to do that today thanks to DoorDash. Did the game just go to a timeout? It's time to order in with DoorDash. Is it halftime? That's ordering time, and the 2-minute warning, that's your cue to get ordering. Time to pull out your lucky jersey and order your favorite apps and snacks on DoorDash, because football is coming again this weekend. Why root on your favorite team with an empty stomach? You wouldn't do it in the stadium, so why are you doing it at home? Order on DoorDash and save on football watch party favorites. Order pizza, wings, soda, burgers, even just the buns. If you got everything but the buns, you can still get just the buns on DoorDash. Get it all delivered without missing the game. Kick back at kickoff with unbeatable deals on everything you need for your watch party or your tailgate, and all your favorite restaurants and stores from retail to grocery. They're on the app, so you can shop everything you need to get game day ready. If you want to, get prepared before game day. Stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all your tailgate gear on DoorDash. Then get ready to watch your team win. Get 50% off on up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter the promo code LOCKED23. Don't forget to use that promo code LOCKED23 for 50% off up to $10 on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more. Subject to change. Terms apply. Thanks again for making Locked On Eagles, Locked On Commanders your first listen today and every day. As we both greatly appreciate all of you for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Football season is here and well underway. Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Every Friday, Locked On is going to go live at 2 p.m. Eastern time on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. And your hosts, Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs, are breaking down every game on the NFL schedule to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, and hit your betting angles and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel, which means Locked On Eagles, Locked On Commanders. You can keep it locked right there. Make sure those notifications are on, and you will get to tune in to that live episode every single week. Louis, Eagles Commanders NFC East division matchup. The Washington Commanders have already lost 2 NFC East division matchups. They desperately need to get this one. But for the Eagles, who would certainly like to get this one, right, go 7-1 instead of 6-2, what is the biggest matchup that you're seeing between these two division rivals?
Yeah, I look at the battle that honestly I was watching last time these two teams met, and I think it hurt them. It's the Commanders passing attack led by Sam Howell, Terry McLaurin, Jayon Dotson, Curtis Samuel against that Eagles secondary. And we'll see if Kevin Byard plays. If he does not, the secondary, though, still has been looking pretty good over the last 3 weeks, but it's been an up and down season. That's been, I think, their weakest link so far from an offensive and defensive perspective. There's been a lot of injuries there. Darius Slay has missed some games, James Bradbury as well. Avonte Maddox, their star slot corner, has been out for the year since week 2. Bradley Roby they brought in from the streets, and he got hurt as well. Eli Ricks has been playing inside. He's an undrafted rookie right now. So I think that's the key matchup, and it's what almost cost them in that game against the Commanders is they could not stop the passing attack. And if it wasn't for that decision to not go for 2 at the end of the game, the Commanders might have threw their way to a victory at the end. So they've tightened things up since that matchup. It really was that matchup when things started to turn around. Darius Slay actually had the highest PFF grade this past weekend against Miami. They shut down the best passing attack in football. Can they do it 2 weeks in a row against some talented receivers? That's a key that I'm watching.
Yeah, and you know what? Coming out of that game, man, we're like everybody on the Commander side of things are saying, look, they played really competitive football, played pretty solid. I mean, you know, you don't want to give up 30 points to anybody, even the Philadelphia Eagles, but still played fairly solid football down the stretch. How can they improve on that performance the next 2 weeks to really come in the next time they see this team and be even better? And now, I mean, the mood couldn't be more night and day, I think, from coming out of Philly to going into this next matchup. But, you know, you go back to that 2-point conversion. It's something that was talked about a lot after the fact. And it's something that honestly, we could eat the media circle. We've continued to play. We're on the sideline of practice getting ready for a New York Giants game. We're still talking about that 2-point conversion because a lot of us kind of think, you know, we wonder if Coach Rivera at the sideline really said, hey, look, we got Thursday night against the Bears coming up. We can't afford to play another half quarter, full quarter against this Philadelphia Eagles team. Go for 2. If you lose, okay, you lose, you take those lumps. But if you win, you get out of here with that victory, but also you don't have to play extra football with Thursday night waiting. Anyway,
I thought they were going to win, man. I mean, I thought they were going to win that game if they went for 2. They had the Eagles on the ropes. They were exhausted. And like you said earlier, each win counts for the Commanders right now in the NFC playoff race. I mean, Tampa Bay is holding on to that 7 seed at 3-3. The Commanders are 3-4. So if they were 4-3 right now, they'd be in a playoff spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone matters, especially in national football. There ain't no 82 or 100 and whatever crazy games going on in other leagues. You don't have time to make up for those losses. Look, Sam Howell versus Eagles secondary, that is the key matchup in this game, I think. Like you hit it right on the head. I'm going to go the same direction, but I'm going to take a little bit of a different view of it so that we're not just saying the same thing. It's no secret for any NFL team that winning the turnover battle is huge, right? In every single game you go into, key to victory, win the turnover battle. But against Philadelphia, it might be even more important. The Eagles have a plus turnover margin in their 6 wins. They've got a negative turnover margin in their it's only 1 loss. It's the only one you can talk about, but the plus, the minus, it matters. The Washington Commanders are the only team this season to not turn the ball over even once against the Philadelphia Eagles this season. And Louis, you're talking about a team that is 31st in the NFL, I think, in interception percentage against opponents. So it's not like they're taking the ball away at record paces, but every game, except for the one they played against Commanders, they are still getting takeaways. And the Eagles are not giving everybody the benefit of 4 giveaways every single week. And I'm sorry, Jets fans, but you don't beat the Eagles without 4 giveaways from their offense. But because Sam Howell and the offense were really smart with the ball, really secure with the ball, even when they didn't move the ball or score during a very frustrating stretch of that game, they secured it. They played solid field position games. Philly's best starting field position for a drive in week 4 against the Commanders was their own 43-yard line, which is still fairly good, but it's not the other side of the 50 good. And there's only 2 games this year the Eagles have not had at least 1 possession start in the opponent's end. The Commanders, who almost beat them, and the Jets, who did beat them. You got to play that field position game. Even if you're not scoring, you cannot give the Eagles a head start at all. That's why Sam Howell versus this Eagles secondary, move the ball even just a little bit. Don't let them have short fields. Don't turn the ball over. That's the key to trying to get a victory. Louis, who is the most important player on the Eagles roster this weekend?
I think right now it's got to be Lane Johnson, right? I think the defensive line of Washington is the strong suit with, you got Young, Sweat, Allen, Payne up front. Lane Johnson, when you saw 2 weeks ago, another reason they lost to the Jets, Philadelphia, that is, when Lane Johnson went down with that ankle injury and Jack Driscoll had to come in. He allowed 8 pressures in like 2 quarters. It was egregious. Lane Johnson, outside of Jalen Hurts, might be the most important player on this football team. So if Lane can hold up, he finally gave up his first sack last week for the first time since 2020. If he can hold up that offensive line and give Jalen Hurts time, this passing game is starting to heat up. And that's the thing. I'm really glad you mentioned turnovers, David, because when you look at the Eagles, they're still moving the ball up and down the field. They're 4th this year in EPA per play. They're 1st in the NFL in converting drives into scores. A lot of them, too many of them, have been field goals because their red zone offense has been up and down. But you mentioned turnovers. They're getting the explosive plays of 2022, but they're making way more mistakes than they did last year. Last year, they had a +8 turnover differential with just 6 interceptions from Jalen Hurts. This year, all year so far, the Eagles are at -2, 8 interceptions already from Jalen, and 3 fumbles lost. He had 2 more turnovers against Miami Sunday night. So the Eagles are making mistakes on offense, and on defense, they're not getting the interceptions. They're actually second in takeaways from a forced fumble perspective, but that's why Kevin Byard, I think, comes into play, and he's so important for this defense now because he's got a nose for interceptions, but so is Jalen Hurts right now. They need to limit the mistakes because it's hurting this team way more than it did last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Louis, I'll tell you what, man, we are on the same page here because your most important player is an offensive lineman. My most important player is defensive tackle Daron Payne. And I know they're not going to necessarily see each other every single time, but I mean, it starts in the trenches, right?
Yep.
Look, this defense, we left the Giants game asking like, what's really wrong with this team? Because there's a lot of really good players on this team. Like there's a lot of other teams out there as the trade deadline gets closer, talking about trading for Commanders players. So it's not like the Commanders just have this bare cupboard or no, the Chicago Bears beat them, but nobody's talking about trading for any Chicago Bears. You know what I'm saying? They want some Commanders players though. And defensive tackle Daron Payne, to me, has to be the solution to the problem. And the problem right now that I see, Louis, is that this defense doesn't have teeth. They've got a lot of talent. They got a lot of athletes. They've got no killers. You know what I mean? And look, I'm not trying to go last Boy Scout here. I don't want any actual killers on the football field, but you need that mentality. Daron Payne's kind of a quiet, more reserved type of dude, but I really feel like if he gets a voice, if he stands up, and if he helps try to get that defensive line really going early in this game, he can make a difference. The Washington Commanders are 6th in the NFL this season in sacking the opposing quarterback. But nobody really talks about it. And nobody really talks about this unit. Like they talk about the first round picks, you know the names, you know the pedigree, but nobody really talks about it. They're terrorizing other quarterbacks around the NFL. Why aren't they considered one of the best defenses in the NFL right now? Because unlike the Ravens, Bills, Dolphins, Eagles, and the Seahawks, who have more sacks than the Commanders, Washington doesn't hold opponents under 30 points more often than they allow opponents to score over 30 points. We've already kind of hit on that, right? But the Dolphins are the only ones even challenging the Commanders in that category. Meanwhile, the Eagles, the Bills, the Ravens, the Seahawks, they're not giving up points while they're also trying to harass quarterbacks. And Washington's only given up fewer than 20 points 3 times. So it's the ultimate feast and famine defense this season for the Washington Commanders. If they're going to get some bite to their game, they need to do it this weekend. I think Daron Payne is going to be the guy to do it. And honestly, Daron Payne said something in the offseason or the preseason that kind of rubbed us the wrong way. We kind of been watching to see it happen, and honestly, it's come to fruition. He told us that sometimes he likes to come into games, kind of see what the rhythm is going to be of that game, and then really turn it up once he kind of gets a feel for it after about the first half.
At all. If I heard that from one of my players, I would be very concerned.
Absolutely, and we were. And you know what, though? You watch the Washington Commanders, and that's really kind of who their defense is. They kind of bend. Sometimes they break. Look at the Denver Broncos game. They break, but then later – they step it up and it's okay. Now we're going to play. We need this defense. Sam Howell needs this defense. The Commander needs this defense to come out and play 60 minutes of killer instinct football. And I think Daron Payne, as quiet as he is, as smooth as he is, Daron Payne is exactly the kind of guy to do it. But is he going to do it? And is that what has to go right for the Washington Commanders to beat the Philadelphia Eagles this Sunday? We will tell you what has to go right on each side of the ball next on this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Eagles, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to do that thanks to our sponsors over at FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed whenever you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. So if you're a Commanders fan and you want to get bold, put $5 on the Commanders, and whether they make you smart or they prove you wrong, you get $200 in bonus bets no matter what. Currently, the Washington Commanders are 6.5-point underdogs against the Philadelphia Eagles this Sunday at home, with an over-under of 43.5 points scored between the two. Not a lot of faith in what's going on in the DMV right now, football-wise. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than now. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You can build your own parlays, which is my favorite thing to do on that app, but also potentially one of the most dangerous things to do on that app. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League. Today's crossover episode also brought to you by Jace Medical. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world, and today it's more important than ever to be prepared, especially if you might be traveling for any of the upcoming holidays that we've got on the calendar. The Jace case is a personalized emergency medical kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. In fact, you can customize your Jace case with dozens of add-on medications that fit you and your family. Jace is also continually working to expand their medication offerings. In those recent efforts, they've added ivermectin as an option in the Jace case for those who might need that anti-parasitic medicine. You can even get gift cards for your family or your loved ones so they can get a Jace case of their own. So go to jacemedical.com, enter the promo code locked on at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code locked on at jasemedical.com. Wrapping up this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Eagles, Locked On Commanders, brought to you by Prize Picks, our weekly tradition here on the Locked On Podcast Network. One of my favorite episodes to do every single week. And I know my listeners, even when it's the Eagles, guys, my listeners love getting the other side of this coin because I don't know the Eagles the way that Louis DiBiase does. So, Louis, what has to go right for the Philadelphia Eagles to go 7-1?
Yeah, and one main one is what I've already said is definitely they have to limit the turnovers. Do not give Washington short fields. If they can win the turnover battle and give this offense shorter fields, that's going to help a struggling red zone offense as well. So win the turnover battle, but I would also say, David, it's being balanced on offense. I feel like this team gets a little out of rhythm when they're throwing too much or even running too much. I think they had a perfect balance against Miami. I think it was about 25 carries between DeAndre Swift, Jalen Hurts, and Kenneth Gainwell, and then 31 passing attempts for Jalen Hurts. That's the right kind of rhythm. Those long sustaining drives where they're eating 6 to 8 minutes of clock really helps out this football team. So I think the balance attack really just keeps things moving on the right track for this offense. So I would say a balance of the passing game and the run game. That's the key for the Eagles this week.
Yeah, and like you said, you kind of touched on already during this episode. I've kind of already touched on what I'm going to say this episode. What has to go right for the Washington Commanders is consistency. You have to get off to a fast start offensively, defensively. You don't have to get takeaways necessarily, but just keep the Philadelphia Eagles from scoring on even, say, more than 33% of their first half possessions, right? Washington got off to a 17-10 lead in the first half against Philadelphia Eagles last time they faced each other. Could have taken that to a 24-10 lead. Man, Louis, I'll tell you what, I was not in Philadelphia, unfortunately, but I was sitting on the edge of my couch saying, guys, if you can just make this a 24-10 lead, I'm not saying you got it, but that goes a long way to getting it. You make the Eagles a little bit more one-dimensional, and that makes things a little bit easier on defense. Unfortunately, they just couldn't get over the hump during those couple of drives where they had a chance to do that. And at the end, they got to get a last-second touchdown to Jahan Dotson, which honestly kind of feels like that's almost his last catch of the season at some points to tie it at 31. The question has never really been whether or not the Washington Commanders have the talent to compete with the Philadelphia Eagles, really with anybody in the NFL. They do. They absolutely have the talent. They have the coaching. They got the players. They got the pieces. The question is, are they going to do it? Right? That's really all the question is. It doesn't happen every weekend. But if it doesn't happen this weekend specifically, we've already got those trade rumors swirling around guys like Chase Young. We've already got people calling for head coaches jobs and GM jobs and all these things. I'll tell you what, Louis, it's weird because it's 6-1 defending division champion Super Bowl team going up against a 3-4 third place division team. But this 3-4 team has to beat this Eagles teams, or if not, my job is going to get a little bit more complicated. And I'm going to have to sift through a little bit more rumors than I'm used to since Dan Snyder left, and things are going to get a little bit dicey before Halloween. But a win, it makes them 500, but it makes them feel like they're more than 500. So that's exactly what this team needs to get on track. And I just want to say something real quick maybe not before. We're already kind of towards the end of this episode. I got a little bit of guff when I had Joe Marino of Locked On Bills on earlier this season because Joe he represents his Bills fandom pretty solid in his background and everything. I don't because I'm on the beat every single day, so I got to keep it unbiased and all that stuff. I do have 2 Eagles statues in my background. Understand this?
I did notice
those
that.
are for my father.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I did.
My
notice
father,
that.
who recently passed away, had a large affinity for Eagles. He was not an Eagles fan. He just loved himself some Eagles. So those are in honor of my father. Those are actually his Eagles. I brought them home after his funeral. So anybody out there, those are not for the Eagles. Those are for my father. It's okay. I promise you.
Might be some good reverse psychology anyway there, or some reverse jinx to have that in the studio, have the enemy in your room and then boom, that'll be a win.
Yeah. I actually thought about starting my own little Taylor Heineke tradition. I've got some Kelly Green Jordan 1s in my closet. And I was like, you know what? Maybe if I wear the Kelly Green Jays to the Giants game, it kind of gives a head start to the mojo for the Eagles game. But I didn't do it. I was like, I'll leave it.
Everybody's got their weird superstitions. I used to wear whatever jersey color the Eagles were wearing when I was a kid. I would wear, like, if they were wearing green, I was wearing white. If they were wearing white, I was wearing green. So everybody's got their thing.
Yeah, absolutely. How about those Kelly Greens? Look, you don't have to be an Eagles fan, but those Kelly Greens were nice.
They are. And look, I grew up with the midnight green. I don't ever want to see them get rid of those jerseys, and they've won so much of them. But I don't know if there's a nicer jersey in the NFL than the Kelly Greens they sported Sunday night. And with the aesthetic of these guys, all of them wearing visors too. They were one of the coolest looking football teams I've ever seen. And thank God they won, because they looked too good to lose that game.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we say about the black Commanders uniform. Like, it's not a throwback, but it's an all black uniform. It looks kind of mean and tough, but they lose.
That's the one thing I miss about the Eagles
this
year, because of the Kelly Green is being used this year. There's no black jersey, so they'll get back to that in 2024.
Absolutely. And we'll get back to this in 2024, unless there's a Commanders-Eagles playoff matchup, maybe down the road. We'll see.
Know. If they're 2-7, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to do it today, though. It's going to do it for this crossover Thursday episode. Locked On Eagles, Locked On Commanders coming up, guys. We've got at least one more episode coming up for you before kickoff. So make sure you come back for that. In the meantime, make sure you're following Louie on Twitter at DiBiase LOE. Even Commanders fans, you want to know the enemy intel. So make sure you're following Louie at DiBiase LOE. You can find me on Twitter at DHarrison82. As always, thank you so much for making us your first listen or view today and every day. Every day, as we appreciate you coming through both shows like you do. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day, part of your football routine. Until we speak again, please, if you're out and about, be safe, be kind to one another. And thank you for coming through for Locked On Commanders, Locked On Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.